You will be queen, for nothing can drive them away. We could beat them forever and ever. We could be heroes just for one day. And you can be mean, and I drink all the time, 'cause we're lovers, that's a fact. Yes, we're lovers, and that is that.
Please help me welcome to the stage artist and composer Ozark Henry and acclaimed mixing and audio engineer Ronald Prent. Thank you guys for joining us today. Thank you so much for being here. So it was very cool for me to be able to sit here and look out at the faces and see the people really engaging with that experience. If you could describe for us what exactly was that they just sat through?
Well, especially for the people in the middle, because they're the ones who are sitting within our setup. They've experienced immersive sound. Immersive meaning generating a 3D image that blurs the lines between the digital and the physical. Or to say it in a simpler way, when I'm performing with an orchestra, I am always amid the orchestra. I'm not in front of the orchestra, meaning that I'm always surrounded by sound. I'm immersed in sound. And immersive sound gives you that same experience in recorded music.
Great. So, do you agree with that? Is there more to it?
Most certainly. No, it is a new way of having the listener experience a creative process of an artist that wants to communicate his music in a different way. And in stereo, it's fine, and on an iPod, it's fine, and headphones, it's fine. But this, you actually put inside the music that the guy created, or the girl, and you live the emotional experience, which is so much bigger and so much more involved with yourself than just listening to two speakers.
Yeah. So you said something very interesting that I'm going to key off of, which is to bring the listener along with the process. This particular audio sample that everyone just heard comes off of your album Paramount.
Yes.
Which it's sort of the chicken and the egg question. Which came first, the idea for the album? You were involved with the National Orchestra of Belgium via invitation.
Yep.
How did that cascade into creating all of this?
Well, the thing is that I was invited by the National Orchestra of Belgium to curate my work using their fantastic 90-piece orchestra. And knowing that my dad is a classical composer, that's the music and the sound that I was brought up with. For me, it was an opportunity to really full circle. I wanted to explore in the score every color, every dynamic I could get from such a big orchestra. And of course, being a producer, I wanted to record it in a way that hasn't been done before. Not thinking at that time about immersive sound, because I didn't even know that existed. But I wanted to have like a really big canvas, because that is very important to put a 90-piece orchestra. And I wanted to do something about the space. I wanted to share that special emotion you have when being immersed by that big sound when performing with them.
So in trying to tackle that problem, somewhere along the lines, you began to work with the RO3D chaps? Is that?
Well, it was step by step. The first thing I had to question myself is what is a canvas? I have some footage to.
Yeah, a very good way to explain this.
A good way to explain this is what is a canvas, and asking yourself, does size matter in music? This is Pablo Picasso's Guernica, a painting he made in 1937, expressing the horror he witnessed in events that would lead up to World War II. People who have had the opportunity to see this in real life, it's huge. It's 3.5 meters high. It's almost 8 meters wide, so it wouldn't even never fit in this room. Why is it so big? Because of what the content is saying you. It says there's a war coming, it's a monster, and it's unstoppable. I think with music being an art form, as painting is an art form, one has to always question, what canvas will I use when starting a certain work? I was assured that working with a 90-piece orchestra, having the richest instrument possible in color and dynamic, I needed to have like a really big canvas. Luckily, I have a big canvas, the canvas that I normally work in, and that is my canvas. The white circle represents my canvas. The size of the circle represents the quality of my canvas. And within that canvas, I have placed a 90-piece orchestra. The size of the pictogram just represents the quality, the dynamic, the direction, everything such a big orchestra has to offer. So from my research, I did understand that the good thing is that my canvas is big enough, but I know that this is not going to help me to feel that special thing being immersed by sound.
Mm-hmm. It's like you can watch a high-definition film, but you're still on this side of the screen.
Yes, you're always in front of it, you're not in the music. And of course, knowing Ronald and knowing that he's the expert in surround music, mixing, engineering, recording.
How early in the process did you become involved in the project?
Very early. I mean, the idea got settled and they wanted to do it. And Pete called me up and Peter Robert came to visit us. And he said, I'm going to do this. And they told me what he just told you guys. And I said, oh, that's a big canvas. But there's a new technology called RO3D that uses 9 or 10 speakers. You can choose which configuration, which will allow us to actually represent your canvas in a 3-dimensional world and put you inside or among the orchestra, and therefore give the listener a completely different experience of your musical ideas. And from that moment on, he said, okay, I want to do this.
Yeah.
So we did the whole process of the recording, the mixing, the producing, everything was done with this in mind.
Cool, cool. Even to the point of how much consideration do you have to put to like where you're placing a microphone, the orientation of that. I know we were talking before about the easy trap of let's just take a flute and put it over here and take a clarinet and put it over there, but that doesn't really serve the purpose.
It doesn't serve the purpose. No, you want to put the people in a space. If it's virtual or real, doesn't matter. You want to put them in a space to experience the emotional content of the music more than just with headphones or two speakers. Mm-hmm. And the orchestra is mic'd in a traditional way with a Decca tree and a very classical way. Then it's mic'd in a second way, which is more point to the instruments, more pop-like. And it's done in a three-dimensional way. So there's three different stages in which I've recorded it parallel when they did the live performances. But you also look, where do you record the orchestra? Do it in the concert hall, in the studio? Mm-hmm. We ended up doing it in the rehearsal space of the orchestra. We went to see the orchestra before we started doing our planning. And that was so powerful. And I walked around the orchestra while they were rehearsing. And I said to Peter, I don't think we have to think about anything anymore. We're going to do it in this space. I know it's not meant to be recorded here. It's a rehearsal space. But the power of the orchestra, you will never get that in a studio or in a classical performance space.
Yeah. And that seems to make sense too. One would think that the rehearsal space of an orchestra is designed in a way to where they are the ones who are hearing it the best.
Absolutely.
So if you are then approaching it to record it in the way that they would hear it, it's accomplishing the goals that you're laying out. There's a great documentary that is available online about the creation of the album, and I think we want to show a snippet of that. And the documentary is also in the surround, so you guys will be able to experience a little bit different, something a little different than music.
Pieters muziek. Als je goed naar hem luistert en goed naar hem kijkt, dan leer je hoe je zijn muziek kan omzetten in hoe hij het in zijn hoofd heeft. Piet had een bepaalde visie over hoe hij dit project wilde doen. Dus heb ik toen ook gekozen voor 3 benaderingen van één en hetzelfde orkest. Namelijk een hele poppy benadering om per lessenaar, zoals we dat noemen, per 2 instrumenten een microfoon te plaatsen. Vervolgens een klassiekere benadering ook op te stellen. En ook nog 5 hoogtemicrofoons plaatsen in het orkest. En dat opent een creatieve deur. Het resultaat was dat ik ook tijdens het mixen, want dat was het hele idee, kon wisselen van plaatsing van het orkest. Ik kon van zeer groot en luid en powerful orkest, daar kon ik het door de klassieke microfoons uit te zetten en de hoogtemicrofoons uit te zetten, een heel intiem kamerorkestje van maken. En vervolgens, als het orkest toetie uitpakt, met pauken en alles erbij, dan de grote hoogtemicrofoons uitzetten, waar iedereen het gevoel heeft dat dat 2 keer zo groot wordt. Terwijl het hetzelfde orkest is.
So it's a little insight into the recording process and how the way it was recorded led into the mixing and everything like that.
Yeah, you could hear me speak Dutch, it's my native language. I don't know if everybody could read it, but really quickly, what I did was I used 3 ways of recording the orchestra. One is the very classical way, classical approach with a Decca tree at the front with 3 microphones and some support microphones. And the second way is really pop, which each instrument has its own microphone, so I can control balance. And then the third way was I put 5 microphones in a square inside the orchestra. And those are projected in the top loudspeakers here, which gave me the possibility to dynamically enhance the excitement or the arrangement of the orchestra. There will be parts in songs that you play where basically it sounds like a little chamber orchestra, although it's a big orchestra. And it's only either in the front or in the bottom layer of speakers. And when the orchestra really gets loud and powerful, then I add the speakers. It's progressive mixing. In classical, you wouldn't do that, or you wouldn't be allowed to do it, because it changes the perspective of the orchestra. Here, it's used as an extra dimension to the excitement of the music. And you can make it small, and you can make it direct, you make it distant and very romantic, or you can make it powerfully loud. Those were the 3 layers that we created. Didn't know it was going to work before. We recorded it that way because the room would let us do that. And then in mixing, after we did 3 songs, we went in the other studio in the mastering room and listened to it in 9.1 on a bigger system. And it was really like, oh wow, it works. That's an exciting moment because it really gives such a different dimension to his music.
Because that's also something we have to sort of clear out. You were working and we couldn't check in 9.1 while you were working. Well, you had to imagine things.
We're Boy Scouting at
So
the time. So you do 3 processes. You do stereo, 5.1 and 9.1 at the same time. So you have to choose what you listen to. Because it's not always possible to listen to all 3 formats switchable.
Yeah.
So
difficult to burn the CD and go play it in your
you
car.
can't do that. So I choose to work in 5.1 and not listen to the top speakers. And then when I was finished, I take the files into another studio and play it on a real 9.1 set. Otherwise, it got too complicated. So now we're a year further down the line. Now there are consoles developed that can actually allow you to do that. So, like technology, it evolves so fast every year that when we did it, we couldn't, but now we can. So, and it's only a year later.
You made a touch point about the emotional experience, and that made me think about touching on the fact that song that we heard in the beginning might have some emotional connections because it's obviously the late David Bowie who created that. And he works in a very unique way. Not anybody can just go along and cover a David Bowie song.
Which is a good thing. I'm a big Bowie fan, so it's good to have his approval when you do a cover version.
Yeah. How did you approach David Bowie to say, like, we have this idea, we want your blessing, and even to the point where you were changing some of the lyrics and really dismantling and recombining the song?
Well, I have a little history with Bowie. When I released my first album in 1996, he spoke out openly that he was a really big fan of that album. I met him later on at times that I wasn't at all successful with what I was doing, and he sort of gave me like the confidence and the courage to keep on doing what I was doing. And at the time that I could do a project like this, I made that version of Heroes, which I did send to him, explaining that the way I edited lyrics changed the content completely from what it originally was talking about. But it was reflecting this project specifically in the sense that a 90-piece orchestra has 40 different nationalities. We were doing something that I never had done before, that was way bigger than anything that I've done before. And that meant that I had to trust everyone. And the title of the album is Paramount is Harmony, Respect Each Individual. I think this was possible because everybody was involved in the orchestra, but engineering, recording, everybody in the studio, everybody involved, the people I work with, my management. Everybody made it possible because we had the courage to believe in something and just go for it, even if we didn't have any blueprint in knowing that we would succeed. And that's where the song stands for, I think, the way it's been edited. And David really liked it. So
yeah, I was going to ask if he was able to hear it.
Yeah, he never heard it in immersive sound. He just heard a stereo demo that I made, but unfortunately.
To dig a little bit deeper into the immersive sound portion, that's sort of the buzz phrase that we're focusing on.
Yeah.
Is this, all of us are probably old enough to have gone through many iterations now of audio technology, from tapes to CDs to the short-lived mini disc. Does this sort of fall into a technology in the recording and studio world? Is it like a medium that is going to be moving to take over? Is it a playback device? I mean, you have like high fidelity in the Pono device or FLAC audio files. Like, where does this fit in that large environment?
I think, first of all, it's a technology. I mean, it's a medium. It allows an artist to have a way bigger canvas, actually the canvas one would always dream of, to express everything that is possible with music. This is, I think, beyond styles. This is even probably beyond music. I think it can express way more because it's the natural way of listening to things, the way we experience sound day to day. And it gives back what has been lost, I think, throughout the technology and the way it's been commercialized. That is the original work. And sort of to explain, I just did going back to the Picasso. If that were a piece of music, and you were to see like the original work, and it would be a song and it comes out as a piece of music today, and you would be interested in it, and you would buy it, you would download it, or you would stream it, then you would have this. So imagine you're Pablo Picasso and you want to express like the horror leading to events that will start a world war. This is hardly noticeable. I think it's paying no respect or no tribute to what an artist had intended. And I think an MP3 is a great thing because it allows you to carry music with you on a very small device. But is that the purpose of the one who's making the music? Is that the purpose of the artist? Making something that you can put in a really small device. And then, of course, there's a lot of people criticizing the way I present it, saying, but it's music, you can zoom into it. But if you zoom into it, of course, it's deformed. Going back to what I said before, it's all about like respecting the original work. My interest as an artist is using technologies that allow me to offer an experience which is way beyond anything that one can offer now, but also to share it. Because I think the biggest challenge, after all, was for us not to make this album using immersive sound, but the hardest thing is just to communicate it and to get it towards an audience. Although it's quite easy to do because these sound files may have been big files some time ago, but they're not today. If you can stream like a film, then for sure you can stream this.
Yeah. Is that well, maybe that's a bigger question about technology than to back up, because it's clear, like everyone here probably has a smartphone in their pocket with catalogs upon catalogs of music.
Even I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's great.
How do you get around the ubiquity of that, though, to present them? Like, how do you first explain even what they're missing, and then also translate this experience to those devices? I mean, it's easy for us to set up here with this great speaker system that these guys have put in here, but obviously you can't walk down the street with this rig around you. How do you get that to the pocket?
Well, the thing is that, I mean, for now it's just trying to communicate what it is. The only way to do is to experience it. So,
but there are developments in the new technology. For now, we use a pure audio Blu-ray technology to be able to play it with or without video in 9.1. But soon it also will be possible to stream this in 9.1 lossless. And in late spring, on Android devices, we'll be able to play back from Android devices in 9.1 and stream it.
And we have some of the representatives from Auro 3D here. They were the ones who brought in the system and set it all up. And in our conversations, they've mentioned things like, yes, we have these big playback systems that can do the 9.1 setup, or even larger setups, but also encoders that work in stereo left and right for for that. So
Yeah.
you don't have to go out and retrofit your entire home theater system to be able to reap the benefits of this technology. So that's great. We've seen game changers before. You know, the CD changed the musical landscape. You know, and then we've also seen failed game changers, like who has a mini disc player. I actually do have a mini disc
Yeah, me
player.
too.
It's a great technology, but it didn't stick. And you said you were doing this. We're working toward the streaming element, but right now it's Blu-ray. What if it turns out that Blu-ray doesn't stick?
But I think the Blu-ray doesn't. Everything will become. You can stream it. You can download it. I think the idea to put all your effort in a carrier is weird. It's like having like a phone with a bad receiver, and the only effort you do is to make it smaller and smaller instead of working on a better receiver. I think the technology is out there. You can make this wonderful. You have a great canvas to make wonderful music, and if the platforms make it available, which is I think just saying a yes or a go, then there we are. And then of course you have the choice to build up your system. There's a lot of people already having like a 5.1 system. When making this album, of course, we started because it was our dream to have the 9.1 setup, and then Ronald made versions in 5.1 in stereo, so you can downsize. And of course, we also have like an MP3 version of this album, so it's out there in many formats.
Yeah.
The question is not like what could be the best carrier to hold all those formats.
That seems to be a common thread across many artistic mediums lately, is getting away from the sticking point of the medium and finding a way to get back to the actual creation, the actual experience.
And up the quality for the listener.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
get big to the bigger canvas.
Yeah, I think if we would talk about wine, we would never have this discussion.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't. It wouldn't matter what bottle it would come in. You'd focus on the taste.
No, I mean if we would downsize the quality that much.
Ah,
Yeah, I'm a wine lover, so for me this makes sense.
you touched on the home theater applications, which of course you think 5.1 surround, you think home theater or movie theater applications. So that's film and now music, and being able to present it that way. But there's more. We were talking about maybe sports applications in various ways, and then your great upcoming project as well.
Yeah, well, I'm a Goodwill ambassador in the fight against human trafficking, and I want to make an immersive sound experience that can travel from music festival to music festival, that give people an experience of like 3 minutes, an experience of how it feels like to be taken away your identity and to be taken away control of your life. Why? Because a lot of people don't know what human trafficking is about. They don't know what it stands for, and therefore they don't recognize when it happens. That's also the case for mainly for victims. They don't realize that they're a victim of human trafficking. And if you realize that human trafficking is as lucrative as the whole industry around drugs or arms, then you know it's a big thing, and it's something we really have to do something about. It shames us all, and every country in the world is affected by it. So,
yeah, even just discussing it before, the idea, the concept of being inside of a shipping container and being exposed to the sound experiences in a three-dimensional way, like it gives me anxiety. It makes me feel uncomfortable even thinking about the concept. So I hope that you can find what you need to fully realize that, and I hope that in the future we can find a way
and I
to
hope
experience
it will have its effect, and that people think about it and realize that it's not as invisible as we think.
Have you done a lot of, and maybe this is actually a question better for you in the studio environment, a lot of discussion with this technology and with this approach to recording music with other artists? And what sort of feedback are you getting from other musicians?
We've done not recordings and a project like Pete's from the beginning, but at the moment we also do a lot of back catalog when there's interesting material. Like we did Chesto Elements of Life album, that's 10 years old this year. We did that in 9.1, which is original dance music. And it's amazing that stuff that's done 10 years ago, and you get only the way they worked in stems, so groups of instruments. What you can still do with immersive sound to make that a different experience in the dance. And I've just recently done a project with a guy called Press. He's a DJ from out of London, and that's EDM music. And that's a brand new album that comes out in 2 months. And we've done an iPhone version of it. And it's for them, it's drugs. You know, I did 3 tracks for tryout. He came, he sat there, he sat the whole day and listened to these 3 tracks. And went out of his mind. He said, "This is possible?" I said, "Yes, this is possible with all your music." And then the other 8 tracks that I had to mix got remixed. He went back to London, and I got new versions. Because now he knew what was possible. He went along, and because for them it's a permanent creative process of creating and then mixing, and it's very close together.
Yeah.
And in 9.1 that's a bit more difficult, that process for him, because he cannot change everything every 10 seconds. But they do, and they come up with great ideas what to do with beats and how to use the speakers in an arrangement. So not put something in the top because it's nice to put it there, it's because it has a function in music. And even in EDM, I tell you, it's not what I play at home, but it's great to mix. It's really fun to be in because there's no limitations. You have this big space where you can put all kinds of sounds in and create a vibe for 5 minutes. And so you see that when you bring artists into that process early or even later, they start rethinking their whole, oh, now I can do this, now I can do this, now I can have this excitement, now I can have this dark mood. And it's much easier for them to produce it, because in stereo, you have this little small window that you have to look through, and you have to cramp everything in there, and they want everything in there. So it becomes, sometimes becomes a flat thing that we then make loud so everybody thinks it's exciting. Whereas if you give him this whole space, if you give him this whole space, it doesn't have to be loud, because it's loud because of the space that there is. So you don't need all the processing that we now in today's world use to make everything brutally loud, so they think we listen to it.
Yeah.
And it's really this small, it's like his canvas. It's a small window that you look through.
Well, we want to leave some time available for questions and answers from you guys in the audience. We do have the mic set up in the aisles for that. But we did promise you a listening experience. So I think we'll bring up a little bit of house lights, because we want to encourage you guys to be mobile. Experience it in the box, outside of the box. Let some people change up sides. But you guys brought some listening samples, so maybe you want to set that up and explain the audio that we'll play.
Well, I think first we're going to listen to a song called Love Free to Interfere, and they're going to switch from stereo to 9.1. So to give you an idea in what way the dimension changes, and also the positioning of where the instruments are completely change.
Journey, heading for gold, surfing the sunset, it's drinking my soul. Is there a God? God, and if so, would you care for peace if you're hungry and cold? There's no single thing left to say, I know she knows. There's not a single thing that can touch this, I know she knows. Whatever determines what's bogging us down, let your eyes do the walking and walk over mine. Is there a God? God, and if so, would you care for peace if you're hungry and cold? There's not a single thing left to say. I know she knows. There's not a single thing that can touch this. I know she knows. I know she knows there's only you. 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 It's free to interfere. There's not a single thing left to say. I know she knows. There's not a single thing that can touch this. I know she knows. I know she knows there's only you. 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 Don't leave me hungry. Don't leave me hungry. I know. Don't leave me hungry. Don't leave me hungry. 'Cause I know, 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 I know she knows. I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know she knows. I know she knows.
So as you can hear, it's a different dimension.
It's amazing how different it is. I mean, even just sitting here on stage, the change between the 9.1 mixes and the stereo mixes is so fast.
Yeah.
And you know, we're technically on the outside of the box on the system, but
and again, if you compare it with a painting, it's just looking at a different angle of the painting.
Yeah.
Even if you're not inside the circle, and it's just a different way of looking at the light.
And the cool is, as long as you're in this space and you move, it's like going to a concert. You know, you're always in that experience. You're always in that moment, and that's what's so cool about it.
Yeah, every bit, turning the head, turning your body changes everything about the experience. It's very cool. I think we have one more good sample that we can play in the full 9.1, and then we'll move on to questions.
I'm walking still. Darkness is its arm around me. What's bigger than us all is on our heads. Senses making waves with thoughts that kill. What is it science says about it? Heretical nuts on our hands. Godspeed. Godspeed. 5 a.m. high walking still. Storms to come, I'm undaunted. What's bigger than us all is on our hands. With every new dream, an old one dies. The buzzing in my head surrounds me. Heretical nuts on our hands. Godspeed. 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 would you become the dark? Are we to give in? How would you become the dark? Are we to give in? Or would you become the dark? Godspeed you. Godspeed.
Cool. Cheers. Thank you.
That is something unlike anything I've ever experienced before. So you definitely nailed it there. I think we do want to open it up to audience questions. If you guys have some questions, please make your way to a mic on either side, and we have a few minutes for that. We would be remiss if we didn't take a moment to thank Nico from Aura 3D and Joris, who came to set all this wonderful stuff up. So I think they're sticking around a bit after, so if you guys have technical questions, these guys might be able to field that. But why don't we start over here? Go ahead.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the experience. It was great. I was wondering, was there any thought put into adding a layer on the center speaker? And if not, what was the reason for that?
Adding a what?
The front and center speaker,
Yeah.
there was no layer added to that one. I was
No.
wondering whether there was any thought given to that.
That was
Was there a
intentional.
specific reason for that or not?
No, it was intentional. Yeah.
There are arrangements of the system where you use a voice of God.
There is arrangement
Yes.
of the system in 10.1 where there is a center top speaker. But the music format in Aura 3D is 9.1 the way it's set up here. So there's an 11.1 for cinema and there's a 13.1 also. But for music, they have chosen the 9.1 because that is commonly the easiest to integrate into a home system
I see.
at the moment.
Please, go ahead.
I think you might have just answered my question, but I was going to ask how you chose 9.1 when it seems like adding more and more speakers in an ever denser array would just be even better.
But more speakers also can give more problems in timing between the speakers. The 5.1 is an established format, and the added 4 height speakers or the 5 if you use the center top speaker give you enough space to use them as discrete sources. So it's not a mapped encoding like there's Dolby or DTS, where you have grids where you map your speakers in certain places. But that gives timings issues. This is a discrete system in that sense. And like I said, easier to integrate into the home than more speakers.
Okay.
We were talking about this earlier. I've worked in a few sound reinforcement situations where it's like an auditorium like this, but it's like 10 times the size, like it holds 2,000-3,000 people. And that configuration was set up with pockets of stereo in different places with various delays. Is there too much going on in 9.1 to do something like that in a similar situation where you have pockets of 9.1 so that people can experience it in their pocket of the auditorium, or Does that take away from the experience like we were doing earlier where we were walking around?
That would take away from that. We haven't done any experience like that. In the past, we did it for a group of 150 people, and then it's still a circle. It's still containable. If you go outside that, for instance, we were talking earlier about clubs. What could we do there? You have to then work with PA-related systems where you have to use the timing. But if you do it with clusters, in the experiments that we have done with Maya Sound, it's still, you have to contain the circle to have the experience. If you start adding extra 9.1 clusters of it, then the experience goes away. It becomes almost stereo.
Yeah.
But it is doable, but it's not done on a big scale yet.
Okay, thank you.
My technical question was answered, so I have a question for Pete, actually. So you mentioned before in the beginning of your career that you were struggling more, and I'm also from Belgium, so I guess I know a little bit of the backstory and so on. And it struck me that compared to other Belgian artists, you, even if you were struggling in the first few albums, you always were at the same time building out a more international career than some of the others, but more in the shadows, whereas other Belgian bands, you know, they got write-ups in the press about their American tour, even if nobody showed up, but they made a big deal out of it. Yeah. And now you're a UN ambassador, and you know you've covered David Bowie, and he tells you what he thinks of it, and so on. Was that a deliberate choice to stay away from Belgium in some sense and work on an international career, or is that just
no? I just go where I'm invited. Yeah, it just took me by surprise, because as you know, there's like a French part of Belgium and a Flemish part of Belgium. I think you're probably from the Flemish part.
Yeah.
Because I was really going good in the French part when starting out and being quite famous, but that was the funny thing about such a small country. Yeah. That apparently what happens on the other side, nobody knows.
Yeah, nobody talks about it. Yeah, that's true. Anyway, it's great to hear a song like Godspeed that's been around for so long in this completely different arrangement.
Cheers. Thank you. Cool.
I have a question about a sort of a maybe competing audio technology. I forget the name of it, but it's where you record like from the full 3D environment with two microphones that are like the distance of the human ears. And it creates sort of the same kind of 3D thing, and then you have to play it back through headphones. Like, can you sort of compare and contrast like that technology and this one? And if you could remember the name of that one, that'd be good.
There were several. It's a binaural.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Technology, but it gives you the feel, but you're very isolated in your headphones. That's why some people didn't like it and other people liked it. You cannot compare the two. The experience is completely different.
So, like in this one, you can move around more in the space, and it changes.
Here, you can move around in the space, and it's like looking to a picture in a different angle. There in the center, you have the most beautiful experience. But if you're sitting on the side, you're looking at a different angle of the same picture, and have a similar experience. You hear the same things, but you hear them differently. But they still relate to each other. And binaural in a headphone is only you.
It's sort of a fixed point.
It's a fixed point, and it happens inside your head, not around you.
Thank you.
I was just curious if there is any work being done in live applications of this. For example, in TV, they do editing on the fly all the time, switch from one camera to another camera and so forth. I can almost imagine having a live concert with a group of sound engineers who are also part of performers as well, and they're actually mixing and moving, different sounds to different parts of the stage.
We can when we mix it in post. We could do it. I haven't done it yet. It's not required. I know they're working on a broadcast application. Matching a sports event in 9.1. I've heard a sports event in 9.1, and it's with a picture. It's amazing that you might like football all of a sudden. But and the same goes for live concerts. If you can do them in 9.1, then it is a totally different experience. 5.1 is exciting, but this is a different live. But there are currently not applications available for that at the moment.
I could just see the sound engineer becoming a performer as well.
Yeah, you become part of it, yeah.
So you mentioned that, or you used the analogy that when you're in stereo, you make the music louder to make it feel like you're present, and with the more speakers, it doesn't have to be as loud. Although this was plenty loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, this is also like a piece of music where the orchestra gets at its highest and most dynamic point. So, and that's what you feel. If it would be in a venue, you also feel that it's almost too much.
Yeah.
So that's a very natural.
So what I was wondering if you could comment on the possibility of making music that is as present but not as loud. Partly because many of us are facing problems with our hearing because we've been listening to our headphones on loud for all our lives.
But I think that, and also listening to music in a very bad quality that has no natural dynamic. If you're listening to music, the dynamic is always at its height, which is very unnatural. You know, something if an object falls on the ground, like on a concrete floor, it makes a very hard and loud sound, but it's just an instant. It's not constantly. If you put your little earphones in, it's like that thing banging the ground like for hours. No, it's normally that you go deaf. You will never have this with the system. It's the moment that it goes loud, it's a dynamic. It's an instant. It's not all of the time. It's a natural dynamic. Natural dynamic doesn't damage your ears.
It speaks to a conversation.
I think it's true. I'm saying it's even like from a medical point of view, this is the way not to go deaf.
It's been a long time.
Even if you put it even if you would put it louder, but you don't have to, because the quality at source is also more interesting. We also put music louder because we have a poor quality, and we try to boost what's not there.
It's been an ongoing conversation in the audio engineering world for sure. You get into conversations about compression and how much you're just squeezing everything in to take up all the space that you have available.
The loudness war.
Yeah, it's basically someone leaning on your eardrum for 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, it turns into pink noise.
The breathe come back.
Yeah, just putting your finger straight in.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Right. So I've tinkered with ambisonics in the past, and I'm wondering how your technology compares to that. So with ambisonics, you have your sound source somewhere at a certain location, and then you have an immediate mathematical mapping from the sound source and the location to the individual signals for the speakers. Now, the way you set up your mics in the recording, I don't think you have such a straightforward mapping. So I'm wondering how this works.
No, it is just basically discrete mixing. I've chosen for 3 different sorts of microphoning, and then I've sat down on a console and pan them where I want them. And it's all discrete audio, so discrete channels, no mapping. It's where I put it when I mix it, or where we decide we want to hear the sound, that's where it goes, that's where it stays in the creative process. And afterwards, it doesn't get mapped. Of course, it has to be encoded to be played back from a disc, but it's linear. There's no software involved that tells you where the sound has to go.
Right, thank you.
I think we have time for probably 2 more questions, so we'll take one more here and one there.
Hey, I'd like to say thank you very much for bringing this beautiful immersive sound experience to us. It's not easy to be able to experience this, especially the media as well. A lot of the questions here were answered with, we chose 9.1 to add a layer on top of 5.1 because it's the most direct for bringing to the home. It's a sad truth, however, a lot of homes don't have proper sound dampening, right? Sound damping, and in that situation, is it more difficult to listen to and damp for a 9.1 system versus a 5.1? And what are the effects of no damping at all, of poorly damped? Is it more exacerbated, or does the height layer actually help a less properly damped system?
In my own home experience, it actually helps to have a bigger experience when you have the speakers. At home, you don't necessarily need big speakers. Auro does also demos in a little cubicle with 9 little speakers. And it works also, you can do it with these speakers. At home, if it is very reverberant, your room, with the top speakers, you actually get a better picture than with just 5.1. It's my experience at home. I did put a carpet on the floor at the end to make it better. But I have these little speakers, and it works. You don't need big speakers to have a powerful immersive experience, whereas sometimes in high-end systems you end up with bigger speakers to have a good representation of the music.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, last one.
Thanks for coming here. And simple question. I mean, for ages, all the creators have had this subconscious bias where everything they are creating is for the front platforms only. Okay. Now with technologies and immersive sound being created in a way where you could place a listener in center of the platform instead of putting in front of them or opposing them, do you see the creative process themselves being changing or evolving, so that, like, say, composer is gonna say, okay, you know, for this one I'm gonna place my cello number 2 and 3 in this corner and my triangles at little height and something like that?
I think if it makes sense to the work that you're writing, sure.
But I mean,
sure, because you would do so. It's the interesting thing is that it becomes the same thing as almost performing. If you perform, you also choose a certain setup that is reacting to the room. If a room has a different sound, then you will also place the instrument sometimes in a different way, because some groups become too loud and you want to control that, because it's not amplified the way we play. So it's exactly the same thing. You have a space, and within that space you want something to happen. And the way you put things in that space is totally your choice, and it's your freedom. And that's what's so interesting, because all of a sudden that frame is gone, and you have a full room to work in. And it feels that everybody who's listening is also like participating. And the fact that you realize that makes you more ambitious about what you're doing.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Do you find yourself in a creative place again now? I mean, I know that you're out, you're talking about the record, you're talking about sharing this experience with people of what you've made. How much are the wheels turning for the next thing?
I'm writing. I'm ready to go. I've got way too much material, so which is always the case. So.
And for the few people out there who are waiting for maybe a word reunion for the next album to come out and be 9.1 in hip hop, would you go back to your beginnings?
I don't know. What I'm doing now is something that I haven't done before, without saying much about it. It has become more world music, and I'm still looking for people to help me out on financing my 9.1 version. To be honest, doing all this is something that I support myself. I don't get any support from a label. I love it, but it's not like a commercially great idea to invest in for now. But
well, we thank you very much for taking the time to come and join us at Goodwill today.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you.